Living Memorial to the Holocaust. I'm Joshua Mack, the VP of Marketing at the museum, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to our 6th keynote event of today's inaugural New York Jewish Book Festival. This keynote is a happy hour conversation with Isabel Kaplan, Ariella Elovic, and Stephanie Butnick. It is happy hour. I'm sorry that drinks aren't allowed into the theater, but locks will be open after this. As it's late in the day, I'm going to change some of this intro. We have some more events happening. We have some author signings in the lobby. For those of you joining us on live stream, there's one more keynote event today, and you can find the schedule at the nyjewishbookfestival.org and purchase books at mjhnyc.org/shop. Our exhibitions are closed for the day, but I hope that you come back. We opened our new core exhibition, The Holocaust, What Hate Can Do, in July, and it's on the first 2 floors of the museum. And then we have on the 3rd floor, Survivors, Faces of Life After the Holocaust, some beautiful photographs by Martin Scholler, who you may know from the Times and Vanity Fair and others, and that's up on the 3rd floor. Locke's Cafe is still open, and I hope that you come back. The one thing I would say about the Holocaust exhibit is the second room is really an intro to Judaism, and we have amazing artifacts from all over the world, talk about languages, and then the next room is about anti-Semitism and historic anti-Semitism. So I recommend that you begin the exhibition and go through that. Obviously, we hope that you buy books and menorahs and other things as we're going to Hanukkah, and the store is open. And this program is made possible in support from the Battery Park City Authority, and your donations also help us present these programs. And this event is co-presented by Tablet Magazine, our wonderful friends at Tablet. And I'm going to introduce you to the speakers who will come in a second. Isabel Kaplan is the author of the national best-selling novel, NSFW, which has been shortlisted for the Center for Fiction's first novel prize, as well as the national best-selling young adult novel, Hancock Park. Also, earlier in the week, she had a viral essay on The Guardian, which I recommend. She graduated from Harvard and holds an MFA in creative writing from NYU. Ariella Elovic is the author and illustrator of Cheeky, a Head-to-Toe Memoir. She's the founder of the Cheeky blog, which is an online platform through which she combats the shame so many of us feel in relation to our bodies. Her work has been featured in The New Yorker, Cosmopolitan, and Teen Vogue. Stephanie Butnick is the host of Unorthodox, the #1 Jewish podcast, and director of podcasts for Tablet Magazine. She's the author, along with her podcast co-hosts, of the newest Jewish encyclopedia, From Abraham to Zabars, and everything in between. And all of these books are on sale. Actually, Ariella's is not, because it was a slight change, but we'll rectify that soon. And you can get them in the store, and Stephanie will sign them in the lobby. So without further ado, please welcome our wonderful panel. Thank you very much.
Hi. I feel like we're on a talk show right now.
Yeah, more so than ever before in my life. This is great.
And we are live streaming, so hello to everyone who is joining us via their computer. And thank you to all of you who came out tonight. It is raining. It is not great weather. It is a Sunday night. So I'm very impressed by everyone who is here, and thank you. I have 2 amazing panelists here tonight. By the way, I'm Stephanie Butnick. I'll be moderating this, and I will let them talk at one point in this conversation. But I just want to say how fun it is to be sort of sitting on stage with 2 very, very brilliant, smart women, and to be having this really, really fun conversation. And I just want to thank Ariella, because she was not originally on the program. One of our original panelists, Sloan Crosley, was not able to make it, but we have Ariella Elovic, and I think it's going to be great, and I'm grateful for you for being game to jump in and join us.
So happy to be here.
So let's start at the beginning. Why don't you both tell us who you are and what you do? Isabel.
Hi, I'm Isabel Kaplan, and I am primarily a novelist, and I just published a novel called NSFW, or Not Safe for Work. And what else? What about what we do?
Yeah,
Who
like
am
what's the
I?
book about?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It is about a young woman starting her career in Hollywood and trying to succeed in Hollywood without losing her soul. And spoiler alert, that's really hard to do. So it's darkly funny in like a funny till you're crying kind of way.
I like that.
And I'm Ariella Elovic, and I'm a writer and an illustrator. I mostly make autobiographical comics about, my daily life, living in New York, trying to cook and failing. And my book and topics that I deal with a lot is about kind of learning to embrace your body, talking about things that are usually thought of as taboo, like toe hair, things like that. Yeah.
That's for the Q&A portion, all your toe hair questions. There will be mics that you can ask. So after we talk for a little bit, the audience will be welcome to come up and ask their questions as well. So, this is the New York Jewish Book Festival, so I think we should get down to business and talk Jewish stuff. So why don't you both tell us a little bit about your personal Jewish upbringings and the way in which it does or does not influence your work and the topics you're interested in exploring. You're up first for this. I don't know how you got this seat, but you're first for all of this.
Great, love it. So I was raised Reform in Los Angeles and was a very good Hebrew school student, which means that I can chant a great Ve'ahavta, but I could not translate it for you if you asked. So that's my level of Judaism. And I think what I'm interested in is very Jewish, even if it's not about Judaism, if that makes sense. I mean, I've written explicitly about Judaism, but I think it sneaks into my work in ways that I didn't necessarily plan on. Like when this novel came out and I was reading the Jewish Book Council's review of it, and there was a part that mentioned that a pivotal plot point hinges on a misunderstood Yiddish phrase. And I was like, it does. That was not, a plan. It was just a thing that I thought of progressively, and then it worked. And I think it slips in that way. And I think I'm also the kind of writing I do and the place it sits at sort of the humor and pain nexus, I think of as very Jewish.
Yeah, when you said darkly funny before,
Yeah,
I was like,
it's
just say Jewish.
Yeah, exactly. It's the gallows humor.
So wait, what was the Yiddish word? Does that spoil anything to tell us?
Now am I going to blank on my own book? Yeah, it does spoil things to tell you.
Okay, so don't tell us. That's the only reason you're not telling us, not because you do not remember.
No, there's two. There's a couple. Okay. There's two. But there are a couple different ones, and they are not flattering.
And your book is also set in LA, right? So it's sort of seeped in this Jewish LA world, sort of seemingly similar to where you were raised.
Yes, I think there is. There's a strong overlap. There's a lot of, I went to Temple Israel of Hollywood, and it is very densely populated with people who work in Hollywood. And that Venn diagram, it's not a circle, but there's a lot of overlap.
It's funny for me as an outsider, I'm like, oh, Temple Israel of Hollywood just sounds fake, but
it's on Hollywood
real.
Boulevard.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is
of course
on
that's
Hollywood
in LA,
Boulevard.
right? Amazing. What about you, Ariella?
I grew up entrenched in all things Jewish. I went to a JCC, then a Schechter, then a Jewish high school.
Where are we? Where in the world are we?
In Massachusetts, a town called Sharon, which we kind of joke is the smaller Jewish town, because Newton is the bigger, cooler one. So it's kind of just been all around. My dad's Israeli, so there was that cool, I got extra points for that in school. I was in the advanced Hebrew class. And I think the way it informs my work is it's just, so I think so much of my comfort and where I go when I talk about things that are comforting or joyful or funny, there's always something Jewish about it.
You had a comic I really like, which was about how you can wear your Seder plate, or what was it, the Seder plate is very chic?
Oh, totally, yeah. You can use the shank bone to make a nice chignon in the back. Maror is my favorite lip shade, by the way.
Talk us through the rest of the items on the Seder plate.
Okay, so there was the
Or
Maror
the
lip
egg.
stain. The egg is it's an earring, and you can dunk it like this into the salt so you don't get your fingers in. What were the other ones? Oh, I think matzah could be a cool, you'd have to figure out the right way to glue it all together, but a boxy little clutch would be nice, with maybe a parsley closure. I think that's...
We're not using the Haroset to like...
Oh, the Haroset is a face cream because apple and walnut will exfoliate. So that's...
And this is amazing.
Yeah.
So vaguely Jewish is what you'd say about your work.
Just a hint of it, yeah.
That is amazing. I have to, so the first thing, before I met you, Ariella, I knew you have a group of friends, and I hope I'm not like oversharing too much about your
We
your
overshare
life.
a lot, so go
They're
for
called
it.
the Yentas. So tell us who these women are and how you know them.
So the Yentas, as we call ourselves, is this group of girls that I met at my Jewish sleepaway camp.
Which
in
camp? Name check.
Yavne in New Hampshire. They basically, I think the best way to, I mean, I don't know how gross we can get up here, but I think that going to camp can sometimes be a very scary thing, especially if you're going through puberty, which a lot of girls are when they start going to camp around like 12, 13. And so I was really nervous because I had just gotten my period, and I was like, how am I going to deal with the pad and all this stuff? And the first morning that I was there, one of these girls woke up and was like, shit, it happened again. And we like all look over, and she had leaked on her bed, and I was like, oh, this is what I'm in for. And so from that moment on, it was, you know, nothing's off limits, our bodies are everywhere, we're in the mess of it all. So they were very formative, and we kept in touch, and I think that they really have, through the years, anchored me into, you know, not being so precious or stressed about the insecurities that come up all the time.
It's kind of amazing because now you basically do this professionally for other people, right? You draw comics that sort of make light of things we would be embarrassed of about our bodies, or make, you know, have fun with situations that would be like deeply mortifying. And I almost feel like we can credit the Yentas for this.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. If I get enough royalties from my book, they will get some.
How many of them are there? Because I want to know how much they'll each get.
There are 5 outside of me, so 6 of us.
And is there like a group chat called the Yentas?
Oh, yeah, completely.
Okay. Is it a WhatsApp? Like, is that Israeli part of you into WhatsApp, or is it a...
No, that would be cooler if it was a WhatsApp,
Okay,
but
so it's
we're all on iMessage,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So, Isabel, you were on a podcast called Unorthodox this week.
Hosted by you.
Yes, it is the world's leading Jewish podcast. I know that because I host it. And I don't know if anyone here happened to listen to that, but we had a really interesting conversation. I have 2 co-hosts, but I had the chance to interview you one-on-one. And we started the conversation by unpacking something that had happened before the interview, which is that you and I went to lunch. And this thing happened, and I apologize if anyone here or on the live stream has already heard this, but we went to lunch, we placed an order for like matcha lattes and also our salads or whatever it was. And about an hour in, we realized we only had our drinks and no food. And so you and I sort of both, someone said, oh, you know, would you like anything else? And we sort of said, you know, our food, maybe our food, like we have to go, we have you know, we're doing something after.
I don't think we even said we have to go.
Yeah, I was like, our food, maybe.
I mean, we'd love our lunch.
And so it turns out the woman had not gotten our order. And so we didn't talk about this in the moment. We were just like, oh, please, you know, I think they were like vegan burgers. It was like, can we get our vegan burgers, please? So we get onto the recording, and I ask you about this. And we proceed to have a conversation unpacking the situation that we were both in, and the fact that neither of us really like spoke up to say, we have somewhere to be, what's going on? Like, we were so worried about being rude or thoughtless or obnoxious, and we didn't do anything. And so I guess I want to ask you, Arielle, what would you have done if you were there with us?
I probably would have done the same exact thing.
Which is
like
nothing.
In my head, I'd like to think I would have, you know, stood up for us, asked for our food, been the hero, but I actually really don't know that I would have.
I mean, I think the problem is that we think globally and like in theory that we're all about standing up, but in those moments you think like, well, this is just a tiny little thing. This is a tiny little inconvenience, and like,
yes,
what would be the point of being brusque and rude? And it's just easy enough for me to be nice about this. And the problem is, if that's what you think every single time something happens, then, you know, when is the time that you're standing up?
You know, someone that I work with listened to this segment and said, this depresses me so much. This makes me so upset to hear you women in your 30s sort of saying, like, we like tiptoed around saying something because it seems so ridiculous. We're like, we're having lunch at a nice place. We're like, who cares if our food's late? And she said, she's like, she's about a little bit older, and she was like, this is not what we wanted, right? Like, we did not want these women who are like extremely educated and empowered and motivated to suddenly be like, please, excuse me, pay attention to me. Like, so sort of contorted to make people around us feel comfortable. So let's unpack that a little more, if you don't mind.
Well, I think what's crucial is that we not think we're doing that. It's really important that we don't think that's what we're doing in the moment, because we don't want that either. And the irony is, here we are sitting on stage. We are in many ways, in many aspects of our life, not doing that. It's just the moments when we're put on the spot, when we're not prepared, and that happens to be most of life, unfortunately. And I think the way it all keeps going is that we don't think we're doing it. Because if we actually thought we were doing it, and each time if you paused before you spoke, you would probably, do or say something differently if we were rewriting the narrative, because we would think that, if we are people who speak publicly about all sorts of deep shames and concerns and thoughts, of course we would do minor things to assert ourselves, and I don't know what the upshot is.
Well, let's talk about this idea of like the on-stage persona, the writer persona, and then who we are in real life. I mean, Ariella, your work is so deeply personal, right? You sort of have almost an avatar. You have a protagonist that appears in all of your comics who I think is probably some version of you, but is also not a version of you. So could you tell us about, it's sort of like your Lizzie McGuire.
Totally.
That's how I think of her.
She's my way to do all the things that I think I'm doing, and test it out and dip my toe in and be like, well, what would it be like if? And she slowly seeps her way, but it's really interesting, like you're saying, how, we have this maybe mental vision of what we're doing and how we're moving through the world, and it's different than how we're actually being. And I think my character is a way to kind of push myself further and further, and maybe I will adopt some of her behavior in real life.
So what about her recently do you want to emulate? This creature, this totally creation of yours.
I think a big part of it is kind of how, this is a little corny, but just her way of processing things is a lot more kind and a lot more, you deserve to take up space in this specific way. You deserve these sorts of things in your life. Like, I'm processing a breakup right now, and I'm kind of thinking back and thinking, why were you okay with that? Why didn't you want more? Why in the moment were you not so connected to your body's needs, your emotional needs? Like, what was it that you weren't able to really root in that moment? And I think that for my character, whenever I'm working through something, all of that stuff is so much more immediate, if that makes sense.
So what is she doing? Like, how is she going to process this breakup?
I think, that's a great question. I'm still working through that.
She's working through that.
She's working through it, but I think there's just a lot of nuggets of things without revealing too much. See, now even I'll go home and write about it. I'll go home and write about it, but I can't talk about it right now. But I think just there are nuggets that I think she's just much clearer on and holding on to in a way that maybe will translate into the next relationship, I guess.
I love that. And speaking of the personal, Isabel, you are a novelist. Your NSFW is your second novel, but you, I would say, went viral this week. You wrote an article in The Guardian. I'm not sure anyone here I'm sure you've seen it and heard about it, and people on the live stream. And it was sort of like breaking the fourth wall a little bit, though I've never quite understood what that meant, but I think this is what it is. You sort of show yourself as a person, not as the novelist behind the scenes. You talk about also a breakup that you've had recently. So I guess my question to you is what is it like, as someone who can typically hide behind prose in a way, to really put yourself out there in such a candid and raw way, and so what that process was like, and what the response has been?
It's been extraordinary. This was, way beyond anything I thought would happen, and it's interesting because it is deeply personal, but it's also, by the time it gets published, not raw, and I think that's the part of me that is so such a control freak that I feel like I need to deeply understand every aspect of a narrative and what went into it before I share my thoughts on something. And I've never like live tweeted any emotions I have or posted like that, because I don't want someone else to see something into me that I haven't already rigorously analyzed. And so I think that was like, if you'd read the first draft, that would have been like, the don't look inside my underwear drawer. That's for later. I want you to see the fully dressed version. And in the end, it still is very intimate. It's deeply honest. But I think I was able to spend enough time with it that I felt like by the time you publish it, there's just enough cognitive dissonance that you are not thinking about the reality of people reading it and then going years back in my social media feeds. Like, that's not a thing I thought about, and would never have thought to plan for that, because the internet is full of so much content that mine's not gonna be anywhere. And I think when it happens, I didn't have like the time to think about, okay, how would I feel if millions of people saw it? I didn't. That wasn't one of the ifs.
So tell us a little bit about what the piece said, and then some of the things that, because it seems to have connected with people.
Yeah. So the piece is called "My Boyfriend, a Writer, Broke Up with Me Because I'm a Writer," and the premise of it, and the story of my summer, is that my boyfriend broke up with me 5 weeks after my novel was published, because he decided he didn't want to be with a writer, and he's a writer. And the piece is about that, but it ends up being the thing that so many women connected to in it, is that it's about the ways that women bend an inch at a time. And that's the thing that I think hit home with a lot of people. And I know that, writing is the hill that my relationship died on, but these dynamics are everywhere in, all different types of relationships. And I think so many people saw that. And what the bending an inch at a time relies on is that, like, each time it's subtle. Each time it's subtle enough that, if it were this huge sacrifice that you had to do all at once, you probably wouldn't. But it's the, you're giving in like in tiny, tiny ways while seeming like you're not, because you're an empowered woman. And by the end, you realize you've just, turned into someone you don't recognize. And I think that's what people connected to. And I hope people would, but I've never has anything I've written been read by so many people, which I still don't know how to think through fully, that, everyone, like, I got a message on Hinge from a stranger saying that he had just read about my breakup in The Guardian, and I don't have my last name on there. I don't have that much info.
And did he want to go on a date with you?
Yeah.
That was okay.
Yeah,
He was like, right about me.
He knows what he's getting into.
Right. Totally.
Wow. Okay. So I like that this fact, like, you put out this deeply personal thing, but you've just basically said it was so thoroughly edited and like this rawness that I thought I saw.
Well, and it is there. It
Yes.
was there to begin with, but I was able to, like, all the things were in the first, but I was able to trim away all the other things, and it feels like it's just like you're sharpening a blade.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to make this the most distilled form of itself, minus all the extra rambling that I would do over text to friends, minus all the extra stuff that doesn't really fit in, and that is just me, ranting.
So do you think we should all have an editor, basically, like, who's saying, like, cut this part out of that story you're telling yourself, or, Ariella, when you're sort of self-editing your comics, I mean, what is the role of that person, whether it's you sort of with some distance from yourself, or an actual editor at The Guardian being like, tighten this up, punch this up over here? How does that affect how we tell our stories?
I mean, I think it can be either you with time, or someone else, or both, but I think the key is that when you are deeply immersed in something, you have no objectivity. And I think that's why, like, I journal compulsively, but with no plans for it, because I can't see the narrative then. I'm just trying to get through. And I'm trying to take notes and keep track of what's happening so that one day I understand it, but I'm not gonna understand it today. And when I try to do it, and I'll look back and be like, oh, I was trying so hard to jump through those hoops, and,
Like, you literally read your journal back, and you think you're
not
doing
that
that?
often, but once in a while, when I do, like, there's more there than I realized. Like, I was more aware of things than I realized, and also was contorting reality in a way to make it, like, rationalized and justified in a way that with distance I'd realize, like, that's not bad at all. This was just a bad thing that, I've found a way to process and make okay. And I think that's the reason some amount of time, I think, is necessary, that, you can't see the whole picture when you're living in it. And it's hard to remember that because I pride myself on being incredibly, self-aware, but when you're zoomed in, you can't see the picture yet.
Yeah, I also journal a lot, and I think it's a very interesting thing of when you're in it, again, because the story you tell yourself, you're going to fit whatever behavior you're doing into that story. So none of those flags or issues of how much you're departing from yourself maybe are going to be at all apparent to you. And I think also my illustration practice in this way is kind of sometimes a way to keep connected to that version in a sense.
Are your journals illustrated? Or
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Sometimes, but usually just
So
written,
your
but
journal,
sometimes.
so these are written entries, basically.
Yeah,
And
just
then
brain dumps of what's going on.
And so is the character almost keeping the journal in check? Those are sort of two versions. This is how I told myself it happened versus how I wish I had told myself it happened. Is that?
I think sometimes, but sometimes she'll also feed off of and maybe romanticize maybe something that's going on and kind of perform it in the way that I think it's going when it's not. Yeah, it's interesting, the interplay.
I have to say, I don't journal mostly because I'm lazy, but I think it probably would be helpful, but I think I would be terrified to go back and say, what was I doing on this given day?
But it's also really helpful to go back. I'll sometimes write notes of if you're ever second guessing this, go to journal on date XYZ and you'll remember exactly why.
It's great to give yourself flags and prompts.
It's really helpful because again, in the moment, it's so easy to forget how you were feeling about something because I think we're so trained to be able to pull ourselves out of it or bend ourselves in a different way to feel better about it or make someone else feel better. And we it's like touching a hot stove of getting away from actually how you're experiencing something a lot of the time.
I feel like we should say the character in your comics is routinely not wearing any clothes.
She's never wearing clothing. She
feel like
doesn't
you
like
should-
to wear clothing.
Just to give everyone the visual of who she is. Because
Yeah.
she really is bearing it all in
Totally.
many ways.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that. She also has body hair and a unibrow, which I really love. So can you tell us a little bit about her sort of physicality that is what that does for you and says for you?
Yeah, I mean, she's kind of a dramatized version of me. She's like a goblin version of me. And I really enjoy her because there's just no covering of anything. So it just feels really freeing and really comfortable. And it's a little bit of a caricature, but it makes it so much more fun.
It's amazing. And Isabel, when we talked last on the podcast, you said that, I think a lot of the times when women write fiction, everyone's like, well, this is you, and this all must be based on reality. And you have basically said that there were a lot of things at the beginning in draft, 1 or 2, that were real stories, and that ultimately those got excised, either by your editor or you in the end. And I would love for you to tell our audience a little bit about that process and what it feels like, and then what this final product is, and how much of you is sort of in there.
I mean, I think I am in there in a lot of the emotional honesty and in the feelings. A lot of those feelings are feelings I have deeply felt, but the plot ended up being fictional, and I think that's for narrative reasons. All the things that happen to me are not necessarily right for the story I'm writing. But writing it as fiction was also liberating because I was able to stop thinking about, well, this happened and this really happened, and also how does this make me or other people in my life more often sound? Because, I feel free to, dig through the depths of my own vulnerabilities, but it's different to do that to other people and also to condense and compress. And I found as I was writing it that I felt more free to be more honest than I would have if I were writing nonfiction. And I think my approach to that has recently shifted because I've now published something that is far more personal than any of the writing I'd done before, and I had to that was a different process of finding that honesty. And you're also just narratively limited to this is the chronology. I don't get to switch things. I don't get to. There are no thought experiments. There's only understanding what actually happened. But with a novel, it's more fun to get to write about things that also did not happen and things beyond just me. And it's some of it is cognitive dissonance. It's that, like, if I write about my deepest shames, but it's fiction, I'm safe somehow. And there's, that's, I guess, sort of trying to have it both ways in a way. But I think for so much of my earlier, the first 20 years of my life, I was so concerned with presenting a really polished exterior and seeming like everything's great all the time. And I felt really isolated and lonely a lot of the time. And those two things were directly correlated. And so I think there was a part of me that decided, I'm going to reject that, the idea that I have to keep everything messy inside and secret, because I also think that these feelings I'm having are not specific to me. That the contexts might be specific to me, but the feelings are not just a me thing. And so that was part of the rejection of that deep shame I felt about, all of the things that I thought of as the messy innards of my life. And it turned out to be that's, incredibly liberating to reject that shame.
So is the protagonist in NSFW a young woman from Jewish LA who works as an assistant at a studio, not unlike yourself? Is she your naked goblin version of yourself?
I think
the way Ariella has sort of her sort of alter ego?
I think she was until she wasn't, until I reached a certain point where she needed to not be for my plot. So definitely at first and definitely in places. But then I hit a certain point where, and that was the point where I had to, take out all these things that had happened to me because they didn't work for the story anymore. And I needed this character to behave in ways that were different than what I might have done. And I think that part just took a lot of time to get to that place, because at first I felt really attached to the honesty and to the, connection with myself. And then at a certain point, I realized, if I'm writing a novel, I need to have these people do things that would be different. And so, yes and no if that's not cheating.
I love that. So, speaking of messy innards, I feel like, Ariella, your work is, it's graphic in a different way, right? I mean, it's sort of, there are sort of very honest conversations about a woman's body and the things that happen and the things that women in particular go through to make themselves presentable to society, and the sort of various, and the character is often contorting herself physically to get everything done that she has to do before going out. I mean, what about that is so important? Why is that so important for you to focus on? And is that sort of liberating to you to put out there for other people to consume?
I think kind of exactly what you were saying of just, this is the being a human. This is what goes into it for everyone. And even though someone's not waxing their upper lip hair maybe I might, someone's doing something else to prepare themselves to be presentable or acceptable, etc. And I think my goal with, why I started doing the work at first was just a personal project of mine, just to have fun and relieve some stress. And I think working more and more, it made me more, a fake it till you make it type of scenario, where I just really did start to embrace certain things about my body. After I put them on paper, they just weren't as scary anymore. And after people would relate to them more, it's this empowering thing of, I'm just having a human experience and I'm helping other people share their own human experiences. There's nothing to hide anymore. Yeah.
So let's follow on this nothing to hide. I'm inspired by the two of you. I would like to tell you the things that I did in preparation for this evening. Not only familiarizing myself with, obviously I'm a big fan of both of your work, so I did the actual preparation. But then I went to the hair salon and I got a glaze to cover my gray hair. It's not fully dyeing your hair, but it's like a temporary thing that lasts about a month, and then they blew it out. I got my eyebrows done yesterday for the first time since the pandemic. That was really exciting. I put on a lot of makeup because I was going to be in front of people. I see you both have beautiful nails. Let's just go through what actually happens to go on stage and talk about your smart and thoughtful work.
I mean, I was shocked when I was going on book tour this summer by the amount of time I spent thinking about what I would wear. And that is like the least, I spent years on this book and then years waiting for it to come out. And I'm there obsessing about what to wear. And then I talked to other, female author friends, and they were having the exact same experience. And I think some of that is also that it's like, that's the only protective armor we think we have, the control over that, and the idea of like, there is still that residual, I need you to see me in my best possible light.
So it's
and
armor, it's not like society tells me I must
both.
look a certain way.
Yeah, it's both. I think those they feed into, why do I think it's armor? I think it's armor because this is what people like.
Right.
And that's why I've decided that it's armor. And, it's not just, for my own good health that I am getting my nails done. It's that, I think that, I had an event this week, and that's why I did that, because I had decided that that's what you do before a formal event. That's what,
Yeah.
That's what writers do.
That's what women do.
It was a literary event, right? Will you tell
Oh
us
yeah,
what
no,
the event
this was
was?
for the Center for Fiction. I was shortlisted for the first novel prize, and again, I found myself thinking, what am I going to wear? And I desperately searched for a dress, and most of the dresses I tried on had really strange cutouts. And I don't know why or who decided that that's a thing, but they were and they were in all different places. And in one place, I had to ask the woman who worked at the store how to put it on, and she had to look up a photo because she couldn't figure out how the neck went. And it was like, what are we doing
It's like, how
here?
many female novelists does it take to figure
To
out?
put on
To figure out how to even put the top of a dress on. And the amount of time I spent doing that versus the amount of time I spent deciding what passage I was going to read
Yeah.
from my novel, don't want to answer that question.
No, it's so funny. I was reading a passage for an event from my boobs chapter, and same thing. It's like I've just written all about why these things really don't matter to me anymore.
Boobs.
Well, the book itself, well, boobs matter, but I mean the the physicality, the outward appearance of it all. There's so much more to it than that. Body is a character, and there's personality, and it's not about the version of myself that I'm becoming for someone. But put me in an event, and everything, it's just programmed. It all comes back. And again, I do think it is a comfort control, some way to feel like you have agency over how someone's going to be viewing you. But again,
In a situation where you have none,
Right.
basically your reception, you can't really control what someone thinks of your work.
And it's the same thing that you were speaking about on the podcast, about this concept of, things that we're told are empowering that are just keeping us further in that
And
cycle.
also just so much work. Imagine if we took
Exhausting.
collectively all the time we've spent on this and did literally anything else.
Yeah.
Pick any hobby, anything you might learn, anything you might learn about.
I could start journaling
Yeah.
with all that
Yeah.
time.
I mean, we could do so many things, and I think that's the problem, is that you think that if you do all those things, then you'll be free. That
Yes.
it's once I have the perfect body, I will be able to stop thinking about my body all the time. And somehow as you're doing it, that makes sense. You're that makes sense. Once I constantly think about my body, I won't have to think about my body, and you have to not think that it's never ending, and that's the trap.
Well, yes. This reminds me, by the way, that I always think that if I have the perfect desk set up, I will do more work.
Yes.
And actually, I just bought something that I was advertised on Instagram. It's it's like a dashboard. It's like a piece of paper. It's like a pad of paper, and it has all different sections for you to write down your to-dos. And it's organized in a way that I said, with this product, I will actually I'll finally have everything I need to do on one page, and then I'll do it all. So is this the same kind of trap? Is it like a consumerist trap? What is it?
Yes, I think we live in a late capitalist hellscape.
So we're hearing this is capitalism. So is it especially bad for women though? Do men think about this? Okay, we're going to open this up to an audience
I hear a
Q&A
woman
shortly.
shouting yes, so I also want to flag that the woman is shouting at the man.
But I will. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think
Capitalist hellscape, and how do we get back from this?
Good question. I don't know how we fix the late capitalist hellscape. I think that the things that women deal with are different. I think they are specific, and I think, it's not that men don't feel pressure to appear or be a certain way, but the pressure that they're feeling does not involve spending an immense amount of time every morning looking that way. Like, you know, for
And
that,
money.
like, and money, it's really expensive.
It's very
to
expensive.
do all these things. Like, it adds up. And, you know, it takes up time, it takes up money, and the whole point in the end is that, like, we're not supposed to admit these things because we're not those women. So for us, it's supposed to be like really casual and
Yeah, I mean,
incidental.
several people have walked out of this conversation
Yeah,
who are
not-
here. I don't
yeah.
know what it
This
was,
is not
but
what they're at the Jewish Book Festival for.
Okay, so let's open this up to some questions from the audience. There are mics over here and over here, so if you want to just come up to these mics, introduce yourself, and tell us your question about all things, about writing, bodies, The Guardian. Anyway, hi.
Hi, I'm so glad you opened it up. My name's Mina Rizan. Hello. I'm a Gen X woman. So Gen X women didn't do all these things, and there is a slight, I'm not that old, right? I'm a young Gen X, but like I just want to say Gen X women saw this happening, unfolding for millennial women, and we were like we just didn't, and I still don't, and we just don't. And I think the way you get out of the hellscape that you're describing, you just stop. Like, you're gorgeous. You don't need to, like, you know this. You know the rhetoric. Like, you write about this. This is like your world. So just stop. Just don't paint the nails. Don't do the toner, whatever it is. Like, just, you're great. Like, you look gorgeous. You look fabulous. Your boobs are great. All your things are great. Like, men don't particularly want it. Women don't particularly want it. Just, like, you don't need to do it. That's it. That's the Gen X kind of comment for you.
I love that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Comments or questions? Anything is welcome. If not, I will continue to ask you guys some questions, which is the worst question you can ask an artist or writer is like, what are you working on next? But I'm going to do it. I'm going to ask both of you what you're working on right now.
You want to go first?
Sure. Well, I have a newsletter called Snack Time that I'm writing a lot for, that I'm trying to use as a place to hopefully have another book idea. And a theme that keeps coming up that's semi-related is perfectionism and how that kind of comes up, again, whether it's me trying to cook something and needing to clean the kitchen as I cook, which makes me terrible at cooking, and also just within relationships. And I think perfectionism and contorting and all of those sorts of things are all very related. And yeah, so I'm fiddling around with that.
And I am in the middle of my next novel.
Wow. Okay, so do you have any desire to go memoir now? Like to switch to nonfiction after writing this article that has received really,
I don't think it's like a
rapturous...
switch so much as I want to do more of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like those are different. I mean, they're similar muscles, but they're different. They still feel a little different, and so I think they can be complementary, because one involves like being really thoughtful and introspective and rigorously analytical about my actual life, and another allows me to be playful in a different way. Like, it allows me to be a little more experimental, but I'd like to do more of both. I mean, the reception was extraordinary, way beyond, and I feel like saying that now is going to jinx it, and everything's going to go terrible tomorrow.
Happened.
It's already happened. Well, who knows what tomorrow could bring. But yeah, no, I definitely want to do more of that. And I think it's great to feel reminded that, the things that you think of as your own deep, private, personal, no one else has felt exactly like this kind of way, or just really like, it's everyone.
It's interesting, the more personal, and I think NSFW is personal in a way because it really, not personal to you necessarily, but touches on a lot of, I think, very real emotions. I feel like the specific is quite universal in both of your work. And I'm wondering, do you ever hear from someone who's like living in a totally different place, Ariella, who says like, I identify so much with this, I'm nothing like you, but I identify with your work? Or Isabel, someone who says, your book is about the power dynamics of a Hollywood studio, but I work at a X place in X city, and it resonates with me.
Yeah, that was one of the most wonderful things about it, is that, it's really specific, and I've always felt that trying to be general makes something apply to nobody.
Yeah.
The more vague you are, the more you try to broaden your thoughts, the less it's actually going to resonate with anyone. And the more hyper-specific you can be, the more people can see the underlying dynamics at play. And, you know, I think I've heard from people who, like, anyone who has, like, ever had a boss, like, that's, you know, that's the category. Have you ever worked and had, you know, your work life bleed into your personal? And those are, you know, those are things that are specific to each person's lived experience. But I think the feelings prompted by all those transcend specific scenarios. And if you try to, like, broaden it to platitudes or generalities, you end up reaching fewer people.
Yeah, I think completely the same thing. I think, and especially with the work that I do, it's very hard to make a general comment about your body because it just kind of ends up feeling like an inspirational, like, poster or something.
Bodies are great.
Exactly. It's like, well, tell me why, you know?
And, you know, it's funny, when you say highly specific, I mean, I sort of think Jewish, right? Like, I do think there is something deeply Jewish about both of your works, both in the willingness to probe inward and the sort of searing way that both of your work really, like, identifies broader patterns in societies in a way that's always sort of a perennial outsider, basically, is sort of themes I've seen in both of your works. And I'm wondering, is that something that you're conscious of? Do you even, I mean, besides sort of like the Yiddish thing that you don't even think of as being such a big deal, but it is. I mean, is that something that the two of you are thinking about? I know, not getting into the, like, what is a Jewish writer conversation at all, because that's frankly not why we're here and sort of reductive, but how prominent is this idea of being Jewish in your process?
And I think the, like, relentless questioning and the, like, refusal to just accept a sentence as, like, being objective anything, and that anything can be interrogated and anything can be analyzed 3 different ways. And when you say something, like, it could be held against you in the court of emotional law, and you need to be prepared, like, for all, like, I think that is, I think, very Jewish. So, like, you know, there are 5 different interpretations of how this happened, and which do we think is the prevailing one? And that, you know, like, nothing is ever set in stone. And there is this sense of sort of, like, being on the outside of any given inside situation, and of everything being a little bit tenuous. Like, you know, that you've got to constantly be really aware of everything that's going on, because the power dynamics in a space could shift at any time. And I think all those thoughts, like, that, those are really general thoughts, but I think of all those things as being very Jewish.
Yeah, I think that way of thinking, I mean, through Jewish day school, taking Talmud classes and Tanakh classes and learning to parse things, and it's just very investigative. So I think that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of it as being Jewish just because it's so hardwired into my thought process, but I definitely think there's a way that I'm always looking for the other side of something.
I think there's also, like, the people of the book, right? Like, the written word matters a lot, and, like, whoever, like the story as it's told is incredibly important. And I think, like, that emphasis.
That's right. I mean, we are quite literally at a Jewish Book Festival right now. I think that's exactly right. So I love this idea. I want to go back to the Yentas, a group that I'm not a part of, but I appreciate. I sort of picture them as like a Jewish chorus, right? Like, they're
Totally.
the people who are sort of cheering you on. Is that something, like, how can we all take away? Like, do we all need that group of people? Could we sort of think about them? Could we think about this sort of illustrated version of yourself? Like, could we all have that person who's both cheering us on, keeping us grounded is the wrong word, but sort of holding us accountable to, like, the reality, not just as we want to see it, but as it exists? I mean, what's the Yenta takeaway that we can all have?
I mean, I think, again, it's really hard to do in the moment, and I think ideally it's great if you have someone in your life who can be that voice, but I think you can also train yourself to, I think journaling is a really great way to do that too, to kind of get yourself out of the moment a bit. Like, I know for me, for example, I have hairy arms, and if there was one point where I was feeling really confident and I was starting online dating when I moved to New York, and then I all of a sudden got really self-conscious about my arms and, like, well, what do I do if, I need to wear a short sleeve shirt or something? And the Yentas would be like, I would imagine they would say something like, they can't see your arm hair on a date, it's probably not going anywhere. So if they can't handle that, they can't be with you because that's the tip of the iceberg. Like, there's a lot going on there. And B, that's not your job. as a human to be worried about how someone's going to interpret your arm hair. Like, that's just not
It's
for
a
you
lot of this
to
like
work
work
on.
that we're doing that is largely unnecessary
Exactly.
to sort of center someone else's emotions or needs.
Right.
Okay. I feel like people who are listening or who are here might actually want to start journaling, because I think you guys are really selling it. So what's a good way to start a journaling practice? Is it daily, weekly? What do we need to buy? What products do we need to purchase to do this? Is it something you can do on your computer and then you sort of like Control F for like when I was feeling this certain way? Is it important that it's written?
For me, it has to be on paper. I think that's a personal thing, but that's the only thing that slows my brain down and like actually makes me stop and think. And typing is not, like typing is almost automatic. Yeah. And for me, it has to be on paper. And I think the consistency, like it's the habit stacking or whatever you have, and like set like I'm gonna write something every day, and I think like that's the way to start, and do that until you want to do it. Until like, you know,
is it morning? Is it night? Like, is it should be the same time every day?
I mean, for me, I think best in the morning, but I think it's a deeply personal. And then I'll write things throughout the day. But I think the morning is helpful because it's also a brain dump. It's like if I'm really distracted and scattered and I have a lot going on, it allows me to just put my thoughts somewhere so I can stop thinking about them. And like, okay, I've written how I feel about all these things, and now I won't. And I mean, they're different. Like, The Artist's Way does the 3 morning pages a day, and that's, I think that's great. It's a lot for some people to start with. Being told that you need to write 3 pages longhand every morning before you do anything is like a lot to stick with. And I think, you know, you have all the materials you need right now. I know that's not what you want to hear. You want to hear about the specific notebook that's going to help you there, but you've got it.
No, that's true. I have a monogram moleskin with stickers on it, so I feel like I'm ready. Ariella, what is your process, and how does it work with also your drawing, your illustrating?
I'm a morning journaler too,
Okay.
And because of Artist's Way, I now do 3 pages every morning. But I think what I like about the 3 pages is it gives you like, okay, I'm on page 2, I only have 1 more to go, and you always write more. You always have more than you think. And I think what helps me too is, you know, I'll wake up having some sort of anxious dream, and so I get to write out the anxious dream, then I write out what I'm gonna do that day, and then maybe by the 3rd page I have like something that's brewing in my head that I'm actually excited to jump off from more and work on later. So for my illustrated work, sometimes I'll have a little nugget in my morning journal, if I'm lucky, that I'm like, oh, that actually is a fun tangent to explore, so I might circle it or like write it down on a sticky note next to me to remember to go back to.
I love that. So when you two are not morning journaling, where can our audience, both real and virtual, not that our virtual audience is not real, where can they follow along with your work? What should they be buying? What should they be doing? Tell us where to get more of you, of both of you.
I have a novel that I'm shamelessly promoting. So that
What's
would
it
be,
called?
It's called NSFW, available wherever books are sold, including here, after this event. And I am on, you know, the regular social media platforms under my name.
What's your name?
What is my name? I'm Isabel Kaplan. I think on Instagram I'm IZ Kaplan, and on Twitter I have my whole name.
And is there a website? that
Oh
people can
yeah,
go to?
isabelkaplan.com.
Okay, I like that.
I'm there.
And my book, Cheeky, my graphic memoir, is also available where most books are sold. On Instagram, that's where I post most of my work, at the Cheeky blog, or my name, Ariella Elovic, is another easy way to find me. And my Substack called Snack Time is a great way to keep up with my weekly, maybe some of my journaling things.
Well, on that note, Isabel Kaplan, Ariella Elovic, it's been a real treat to talk to you. Getting very real with you has been really a treat for me. And people who are here, who are lucky enough to be here IRL, can meet you two after and ask you any more questions. They can buy your book. And thank you all for being here, and thank you to the Museum of Jewish Heritage for putting on this amazing New York Jewish Book Festival.